So can you tell us a bit more about your, as a EIB, your priorities in Ukraine right now?
Definitely. So I will stick to these two buckets that we introduced at the beginning. So the crisis buckets or the emergency buckets, and then the long term one, right? So our current priorities definitely have to do with the energy sector because this is unavoidable, right? Every indication is that this winter will be much tougher than the one last year. The heavy attacks, they already started at the beginning of the year 2025 with gas infrastructure, and they're just perpetuating themselves, and they're increasingly targeted. They're bigger in scale, they're overwhelming, right? So here is where the European Investment Bank can also acknowledge that there's an emergency and get a derogation from its own procedures to address that emergency. So, for example, we're also, especially in the European Union, known as the EU's climate bank. In 2017, we adopted an energy lending policy that said no more fossil fuels. We're done. Well, now you see us helping Naftogaz purchase gas for this winter, right? But this is also a manifestation of how committed we are, how committed the European Union is through its bank. It's willing to grant these exceptions under these extraordinary circumstances. And it's not like we're giving up on our climate mandate either, because this short-term financing to purchase gas to make sure that homes are lit, that people are warm, that businesses can function is one thing. But then we also want Naftogaz to decarbonize, right? So this money will eventually, after 2-3 years, be flipped into long-term investment in green capex. So this is how we're trying to also be creative and find solutions that do not basically give us an excuse to give up on all of our principles, but that also recognize the very real circumstances that Ukraine and its people are going through today. So energy is one. We're looking for other ways to top up our 300 million facility for Naftogaz. At the occasion of this conference, we will be signing an additional grant, 127 million that is channeled through the bank by the government of Norway. More may be needed, right? We're working with EUCONLAW, for example, here on shields. You may have seen them. They are supposed to protect critical substations, especially auto transformers. These shields, due to the war, also have to be constantly improved, right? There has been a bit of criticism, for example, that they're not being built as quickly as they should, considering how intensive the attacks are. But we also have to realize that the enemy is constantly innovating as well. So the type of shelter that you built 6 months ago may already be insufficiently protecting the infrastructure from drones that are taking different directions, that are coming in huge, huge numbers, and so on. So this is part of our work with Ukrenergo. Likewise, Ukrhydroenergo, we have signed 120 million in terms of financing at the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Rome to support the restoration of 3 stations of Kaniv, Kremenchuk, and Dnipro. So energy really top of the list. And then let's now cross over to the other buckets, right? So this is the long-term reconstruction here. Social infrastructure, absolutely. Work with municipalities. And here, what we're trying to do is also distinguish between different regions, oblasts, and communities in Ukraine, right? Because Ivano-Frankivsk will be different from Chernivtsi, will be different from Dnipro, it will be different from Kharkiv, it will be different from Chernihiv, right? So what we're trying to do here, as we're trying to rebuild water systems, local roads, schools, hospitals, and so on, mostly these social facilities, right, that really give services to the population so that life can continue. Among them also Tsnapi, sometimes centers focused on internal security, as the one near Odessa in Avangard. We are trying to give better conditions to frontline regions. Because once again, we call this frontier to frontline approach. You have the EU frontier, so the regions that are closest to the EU single markets, right, that perhaps have less risky conditions. And then you have the frontline regions that are really bearing the brunt of the suffering and of the attacks day to day. So what we are doing, we're allocating additional grants that are then blended with our loans with a higher grant intensity for the frontline regions, right? So Odessa, Dnipro, Zaporizhzhia, Kharkiv, Sumy will get different conditions than the rest of the country, right? So the grant intensity can be as much as 20% higher. So as you can see, still being a bank, not a donor, we're doing our best to reflect this diversity of just day-to-day life in different cities, communities, and regions of Ukraine. So currently, again, to give you a few figures, we have about 500 sub-projects under these municipal programs all around Ukraine. 120 are finished. 500 sub-projects also means that it doesn't necessarily mean 500 communities, because some of them actually became very successful at using this funding, and they're great success stories, right? So you can have in one community 3 to 5 projects, right? Whoever has done it once does it again. And this is what we're very happy to see, because no matter what community you are working with, large and small, east or west, north or south, if they do it once, they apply again. And this is really a signal also that if the community decides and applies, it also gets assistance to prepare the project properly, to implement it, and then it can do it again.